by WHO as an international emergency. The first thing was to check and prepare these laboratory across the country if they are ready to test. So we already have the reagents. So we quickly shared the reagents with these laboratory, which is in number they are 23, but as per the geography and wherever there are people who are coming from the affected country, so those nearby laboratories were chosen. So there are 10 in number. So they are designated laboratory for Ebola testing, and ICMR and IV Pune is the apex facility. So currently we have 11 active Ebola testing laboratory. Second action which was taken by Government of India to quickly do a webinar for integrated disease surveillance program officer across the country, which we did on 21st May. And then there was a mock drill conducted on all the hospital in India where they have isolation facility where such suspected cases would be admitted. And this mock drill included that if a patient admit to such hospital, what will be action by the hospital, how they are going to do admission, what kind of precautionary measure, what PP to be taken, how they will be admitted, and how the samples will be taken, how they will be treated. And for to observe that, there was a team which was deployed to do observation. There were a team to observe, and then there were debriefing done by Vice Secretary DHR and DG ICMA. So, why these all exercises? What I'm trying to tell everyone that we are preparing our country for not only Ebola but for any emerging pathogen which can cause panic, which can cause also the affect the healthcare worker, because most of the patient would go to any hospital which has a tertiary care, or many time we have seen the patient also go to other city. So awareness is the key to deal with such emerging infectious disease. And so far India has not reported any positive Ebola case. So what guidance we are giving, that if any patient come to any hospital who have a travel history from affected country, so what kind of samples is recommended to collect? The blood is a very preferred sample. It could be blood collected in EDTA, yeah, blood collected in SGPT, but we also recommend to collect other samples, include nasopharyngeal swab and oropharyngeal swab and urine. In case if the sample is negative for Ebola, then it can be, as it was explained by earlier speaker, that we can do differential diagnosis to find out what exact a problem the patient has. Ebola is known to have a long viremia, not only in the blood but also in urine, tears, semen, vaginal swab, feces, and milk. So, if there is a woman who is lactating, so the milk can also carry the Ebola pathogen. So, accordingly, the sample should be taken, but the priority sample would be definitely blood for testing the pathogen. So, when we are taking any sample, so what the patient has to have identify, keep in isolation room, and the healthcare worker should don the PP, and then they should have area where you do the donning, where you do the doffing, where you prepare a specimen collection kit, where you prepare specimen packaging and transport kit, and where and how, in case if there is a spill of sample, how you can manage the spill to not to leave any infected virus particle. And then we also advise to have observer who can observe and help if there is a mistake happening in this process. Most importantly, we have to also fill the CRF form, which give all the history of the patient and travel history, the symptoms, and if they have any past contact of the affected disease. The the CRF and all the guideline has been already released, and it is circulated across the country. It is available if you would like to access, if you would like to know about it, and you can use it for such any suspected cases. It is recommended that whenever you are having such suspected cases, please immediately loop in IDSP officer nearby in the city, who will help you, guide you to deal with such crisis. As it is a high risk group of pathogen, it is recommended to handle with the caution, following the guideline which is standard. So PP, mostly we all aware with the COVID time where everybody used the PP in isolation ward in the hospital setting. So similar like that, but we all know that Ebola is a disease which transmits through the body fluid. So we also need to protect our eyes. We need to protect our face, and we should have PP which should not allow any liquid to pass through. So if we are using a disposable PP, it should be recommended in a way that Tyvek suit go overall, which should be splash resistance, gowns and other PP which help them to protect the healthcare worker is mandatory. There are certain quality for PP for Ebola which is already recommended, and we can follow those PP which include airborne solid particulates, liquid sprays, resistance, and it should cover entire body so that we do not carry any infectious material home, and we should not infect the family, friends and other people. So to collect the specimen, we should prepare in advance the specimen collection kit, which should include the containers, serum, separated tube, different kind of tubes to collect the urine, stool, blood, and also if you are collecting TSNS, then viral transport media, labeling should be done in advance. We should have all tourniquet and everything available before we go to such a patient to collect the moreover, if we are packaging this material, the biohazard bags for packing the primary container and secondary container should be taken along with. Disinfectant and waste management requirements for sample collections. If we are using as a hand spray, 0.05% of chlorine solution or alcohol-based solution, we should use a leak-proof, puncture-resistant sharp container, which is a standard hospital practices. We can use quaternary ammonium compound, and all the material after collecting the specimen, leftover material should be autoclaved without failure. We should follow hand hygiene that include the clean running water soap, alcohol-based rib, and we should also do the risk assessment and can use extra pair of gloves. We can change them time to time, and we can also we clean the hand in between whenever we feel. The sample can be transported if it is suspected and they do not have exposure of Ebola in category B, which called UN 3373 category B biological substance, and is called instruction is written 650. No biohazard label or DGT form is required. This is a very standard practices where we use a triple packaging and how we pack it, where you have the primary container where you keep the material, and then you pack it with the within a tube or box which cannot break, which cannot leak the material. You put the absorbent, and then you pack in a tertiary box. You put the package in a way that it should not be it should be in invert position. So we follow this triple packaging which is available with all of you the guideline. In case if there is a positive sample, so that sample should be considered as a category A shipment, which is called infectious substance category A, and we put label like this where you have biohazard symbol, infectious substance 6 number, and we put UN 2814, which is label CPES, which is a sign is for infectious material of high risk group of pathogen. Then we fill this shippers declaration form, which is we also call DGD, where we put shipper's name, receiver's name, airway bill number, and the volume of the sample, city of departure, and UN code, biological substance, and all these information has to be filled and it should be correct. Otherwise, flight generally deny and they would not ship your material. So there is a very critical difference between category A and B. If it is a confirmed case, if it is an infected patient, then you will call as a category A. If it is a suspected case and they do not have very possible history of exposure with the Ebola case, it will be biological specimens and it will call as a category B specimen. The samples can be sent to Apex Laboratory, NIV Pune to BSL 4 facility, or it can be referred to your closest 10 BSL-3 laboratory, which is designated already. In the diagnostic algorithm, whenever we have any such cases, they should be tested. The preferable test is real-time RT-PCR. IgM ELISA for Bundibugyo virus is not available, but for other viruses like Sudan, Zaire, it is definitely available. In case of any test which is, if turned to be positive, it will be informed to Ministry of Health, NCDC, Emergency Division, ICMR, and through WHO to also international health regulation. And then, if it is a negative case, there is a new guideline which is being released that the suspected symptomatic cases has to be tested. If they turn negative on the first testing and post 72 hours, they should be retested. And if they further negative but they show the symptoms, they should be tested once again. So there is a new guideline which need to be followed. And in case if these samples are negative, so differential diagnosis should be done for as it was defined by our former speakers. We also need to screen for other local endemic diseases from where the patient is coming. Currently, we have one approved kit, which is called Altona kits. They have two kits. The first is the screening kit. Among the filoviruses, there are many viruses which has a very conserved region, and then this is an endemic area: Ebola, Marburg, and Ebola. All three species can be tested by screening kit, and then further they can be characterized by using typing kit, where you can identify if it is Zaire, Sudan, Bundibugyo virus, Thai virus, or other Marburg virus. So these tests can be done to identify. While handling any samples or while handling the patient, if you have any spill, you can use 0.5% of freshly prepared hypochlorite, and if it is a sharp container, we should be filled with 1% freshly prepared hypochlorite solution. If there is a spill, there is a procedure how to clean the spill. First, you have to spray with the 0.5% bleach. You cover with the towels, and then you wait for 20 to 30 minutes, and then you wipe and let it dry. Hand hygiene is must while we are entering to the hospital, while we are working inside, while we are coming out. So we make sure that we are not carrying any pathogen to home by any means. So we do hand hygiene before donning, after each step of doffing, after complete doffing, and if we found any contamination in between, after examining the patients and after medical intervention, after handling any biomedical waste, decontamination procedure, or if we are handling any human remains. Adequate hand washing should be key to protect the healthcare worker, to protect the community as well. Average time usually adopted by healthcare is less than 10 seconds, but it should I recommend it to have 40 to 60 seconds. Alcohol-based hand rubbing, and also the soap and water washing is recommended for these steps. Environmental cleaning include that we should use the proper PP while we are doing any cleaning, either is isolation room, a surgical room, or where the patient while we are handling the preparation. So we should clean with soap and water, remove debris before applying disinfectant. We should use 0.5% of chlorine solution while we are using a wipe or mops. So we also can use the similar kind of concentration for such area. In any hospital setting, we always dedicate donning area, doffing area, isolation room, and washroom. And there are certain area in our when we did monkeypox cases in a hospitalized ward, we found that there are certain area where the virus is very high in number in compared to other areas, and those areas, especially isolation and washroom, has to be taken very proper care. They should be clean, and we should also focus on biohazard bins, electrical switches, patient care equipment, stethoscope, ventilators, and other equipment where we are using very closely to the patient, and there is a chances that they can be infected. We need to while we are using, we have to take precautionary measures for the healthcare worker. So there are different recommendation, and most of the stool, because stool is also infected, so it should be different kind of independent toilets are available which can be used, and these stool has to be decontaminated by soaking with the 0.5% of hypochlorite or ammonium compound 20 minutes. And these are very important steps to make sure that nothing leave the hospital in infected forms. The linen of patient also a very important factor which need to be decontaminated. It should be collected, transport in a way that it should not have any infectious material. It should not affect other people. And there is a process that you first you don the PP, then you contain linen at the point of care, roll, fold, inward to outward. Then you pour the solution and then never shake or agitate the linen, bag them in immediately, and then do not manually compress or push down on the linen, double bag and seal, and then disinfect the outer bag. So all this process has to be followed. I know that most of the hospital follow the similar kind of practices, but only the Ebola viruses and some of the viruses, even single particle of infectious virus is enough to infect people. So we need to have more precaution. And as it was explained by earlier speakers, that there is no treatment. So we do have vaccine for Ebola Sudan, Ebola Zaire, but we do not have any vaccine or monoclonals for current disease causing pathogen, which is going to be Bogio. So we need to have more precautionary measure while we are doing incineration, while we are doing laundering, or whenever we are doing any process. The safety of individual and safety of others is the key to protect themselves. We can have the discard with the color coded, so that you can discard respective material. It can be segregated and disposed accordingly. uh, there I think in some of the countries where they have spaces, so you can also dry the gumboot and other PP which you are using, and you are soaking them in disinfectant and reusing them. If you are having ambulance where the infected patient has come, you should follow the protocol of defining them hot, warm, and cold area, and you should do the decontamination of the ambulance and then decontamination of the person who is going inside, doing the decontamination of such areas. So the procedure would be similar as you must be doing earlier in the COVID time. We have also done for the NIFA, and always we can use the freshly prepared bleach, disinfect them, follow the spill management, and allow always for at least 20 minutes of the time to these reagents to work on the area. So there are many areas where we are doing this disinfections, and we follow either autoclaving, incineration, and body fluid and excreta can be disinfected by bleach, as I explained earlier. Availability of autoclave incinerator for solid and liquid waste will help to do the waste management in the hospital. And at the end, I would like to say that the safety of the healthcare worker is key if we would like patient to be not only healthy but also the society to be safe. So with this, I do have a lot of respect for the people who work in hospital, who work in such area where such patients arrive, and we have seen that dedication during COVID and so many other outbreak, including in Nipah in Kerala and Cleveland Congo hemorrhagic fever in CCHF. So thank you very much once again for inviting. If there is any question, I will be happy to answer. Thank you.
Thank you for the crisp presentation and clear guidelines for all of us. For Ma'am, I'll start with you. For the postmortem samples, what are the samples? Is it the oral swab? Because blood is not possible or urine is not possible.
If blood and urine is not possible, then we can prefer, we can take a nasal swab, throat swab, and also other swabs actually, which can help to do the diagnosis. And the viruses stay for longer, so we can also take other any fluid or any kind of tissues can be used as well for the testing of the patient. But we all know that for Ebola and other such diseases, there is no autopsy recommended. So it should not be done the patient if it is a confirmed case. But if it is a suspected case, maybe sample can be taken and then proper procedure has to be taken in a place that no further transmission of the disease happen to the healthcare worker and other people. But I'm sure that Dr. Ibrahim and Dr. Bernard can also share their experience on the same.
Yes. Any further inputs, Dr. Ibrahim? Bernard?
Thank you. I think that was very interesting talk. Thank you, Dr. Pragya. I think the points you raised, they are quite very important points, particularly points around care, around the specimen hand and specimen collection. Um, Also, the point about the type of specimen to be collected when it's not possible to collect blood. Um, yes, the throat swab commonly can also be taken. We've done that quite a few times. But even other body secretions can also be swabbing. Swabbing body secretions can also be alternative um, to avoid avoid being invasive. Uh,
Okay. And
right.
this question goes out to you and Dr. Ibrahim. How often do you see co-infections in these patients, Ebola patients? And does that worsen the outcome? I guess you meant because here in monsoon we have a huge outbreak of dengue generally. So I was just imagining how hard it might be because dengue also presents with hemorrhagic symptoms. And is it extremely rare having a co-infection, though the transmission is different?
Right. So I'll allow my colleague Dr. Ibrahim to speak, but I'll also make some comments around. So when we say co-infection, are referring to co-infection with other pathogens. So this might be co-infection with the malaria parasite, co-infection with even any of the bacterial pathogens. I'll speak a bit because we've done quite a bit of surveillance for invasive bacterial disease, but I'll allow my colleague to talk on that from their experience from Bauchi. Sorry, Dr. Ibrahim, please you can go ahead.
Well, thank you, Dr. Bernard, and thank you, Dr. Bernard, for the question. Uh, Co-infection is actually very, very important, and it has a direct impact on the disease progression and even outcome. But usually, the co-infection that we commonly found is with malaria, not with other viral hemorrhagic fevers. But then partly maybe because we don't routinely also check for other viral hemorrhagic fever among these patients. Because if we suspect Ebola and then the test turns out to be positive, then we concentrate on that. But routinely, if they are positive, we also check for the parasitic infection, especially with malaria. And then I've not interacted much with those from Congo and other West African countries because the number of cases that we have seen in Nigeria is quite few, about 19 cases, so we cannot actually use that to generalize. But taking into consideration other viral hemorrhagic fevers like Lassa fever, we've seen malaria co-infection to be as high as 43%. I think the last review from 2025. So it's actually common, and this especially among children less than 15 years of age. And then we also see it among the elderly, they have this malaria co-infection. And this actually not just about prolonging the disease progression, it also wasn't the complication that we see among these patients. Bleeding becomes more common, and then we also see the incidence of acute kidney injury becoming more common among those that have the co-infection. So overall, even the length of stay at the treatment center tends to be more prolonged for those that have co-infection. This is with Lassa fever. Like I said, the number of Ebola variants that we have seen is few, so we cannot make any conclusion about the impact of this co-infection.
Thank you.
Yes.
Yes, thank you for highlighting. And more than 40% is a pretty high co-infection of malaria. So my final question, because of time constraints, I'll ask one final question. This current strain, Bundibugyo, is there a difference in the clinical presentation? Is it less severe, or any comments on the current outbreak in terms of clinical outcome and as well as presentation?
So for this current outbreak that is being caused by Bundibugyo, the clinical presentation is actually similar to the past outbreaks of Ebola viruses, even the non-Bundibugyo Ebola virus disease. Even though we have seen a lot of mortality, as about 67% mortality, but then based on some preliminary reports, late presentation is actually accounting for more of the influence in terms of the mortality. And this is very likely in many other diseases. So it's not really as deadly as like the Zaire species of the Ebola viral disease. And it has been noted that most of those that have severe disease, they fail to develop defensive humoral immunity at the early stage. So once sepsis sets in, then they are more likely to deteriorate.
Okay. Thank you. Any last comments, Dr. Pragya, Dr. Bernard, Dr. Ibrahim, before we close?
For Dr. Ibrahim, I think my last comment would be to keep vigil because, like I said during my presentation, we can have any patient coming from anywhere. And usually, especially if you take uh, into consideration what happens in Uganda, some of these patients actually escaped Congo DRC and reported to hospitals in Uganda. And they were praying that this healthcare workers would not suspect Lassa fever, and it happens until when it was really late. So it can actually happen globally. They can be anywhere in the country. So if we see people that travel a lot, or let me say, so to say, those that are not in, uh, indigenous of that country, I think we should ask about travel. And if they have fever, we should be more proactive in screening towards that fever so that we can prevent the spread uh, in our various countries. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Dr. Bernard, any last comment from you?
Well, yes, I think thank you. I think this is a timely um, topic to discuss. My only comment is the focus at this time is on the Bundibugyo variant, but that does not preclude a spread of other variants. So while there's no vaccine for the Bundibugyo virus variant, but there are vaccines that can sort of ameliorate as well as monoclonal antibody treatment options for the other variants. So just to keep that in mind, that we could have outbreak from other variants, not just from the Bundibugyo variant. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Pragya?
So diseases has no boundary. We learned from COVID very clearly, and we should never ever think that viruses cannot come. So the preparedness would be key, either in hospital or in the labs. Healthcare workers should be ready. They should be briefed, and I think the training, if they are not trained, the training should be done on very highest priority for all the aspect after how they are going to treat the patient, isolation, and all the arrangements should be in place, because in India is one of the place where a lot of medical tourism is not done, and we do not know that not as mentioned by our earlier speaker, that risk is there, and it is always good to be ready, and when we are ready, I think we can deal any such situation. So with this, I thank Dr. Dhanya and everyone for joining today, and I wish all the best, not only in India but rest of the team who are working to prepare better for the Ebola. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you very much and being patient. There were some technical glitches today. We would be sharing the recording as soon as it is ready. Thank you once again for all your time and efforts for making this a wonderful session. Very educated. Thank you.